all set?
We are all set.
Okay, are we on the air?
Oh, yeah, as soon as we are.
We are on the air. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular November meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we will call the cases in the order in which they appear on the agenda. And I will ask the appellants to come forward, be sworn in, be seated, and the chairs to my right. If you'd like to take advantage of the computer directly in front of us, that's also available. Give us whatever information you would like us to have with regard to your case, in support of your case. And then, if at all possible, confine that testimony to 10 minutes. We will then ask you to step down, and we will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who is in favor of the appeal and anyone in the audience who is in opposition to the appeal. We'll check in with code enforcement to see if there is any information from their office that is relevant. And then if any information has been raised that seems to bear factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. In most cases, the board will act on each case before moving on to the next one. Our first case this evening is case number 4.1. Tracy A. Zanto requests approvals for variances from section 2841H, Table of Dimensional Regulations, minimum lot size and minimum lot frontage, and section 2852 duplex or two-family dwelling to allow a duplex on a lot area of 17,424 square feet and 120 feet of lot frontage, where 18,750 square feet of lot area and 150 feet of lot frontage are required. All of this at 15 Fowler Street in the medium residential RM district. Is Ms. Zanto or someone representing her here? Please come forward. I have no idea. Someone who didn't like my speech? You guys can sit over here.
Over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got the email on?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you want to play with the computer.
No.
Okay. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify and then fill us in on whatever you'd like us to know?
My name is Tracy Santo, the owner of 15 Fowler Street.
I'm George Sanderson of Friend.
What would you like us to know?
Do you want to start with the?
Sure. So we are requesting the variance. One thing I did notice when I looked at the zoning regulations was section 25.8.3, which speaks to houses that were built before 1945. This one was built in 1880, and I believe it waives the 1.5 factor, the requirement that is applied to individual family lot sizes. In light of 25.8.3, I think it's section B, it might be that we don't actually need a variance. The lot does exceed the requirements for a single family residence, and as being that it's older than 1945, that I believe that comes into play here.
Okay. Two things. One, we'll check in with code enforcement with Ms. Skinner to see what arose, how that ruling arose. I did look at the ordinance, and I don't think I see it the way you do, but it's not up to me to see it. So we'll check in with code enforcement on that one. And the other thing is that if you wish to contest a ruling from code enforcement, or from, I guess it's not code enforcement anymore, is it? It's, what are we called now? Planning. If you wish to contest a ruling from planning, which you have every right to do, that has to be done as part of your hearing. In other words, we do have the power to decide a zoning variance isn't needed. Customarily, we do ask that the appellant make the case for why, and that be part of the agenda. Let's check in with Ms. Skinner and get the skinny on what, so to speak, on what the reasoning for the decision was.
Well, the reasoning for the decision was that we were not presented any evidence of nonconformity, which we would have needed in reviewing an application for a land use change, which this is. It's changing from a single-family dwelling to a duplex. The deputy city manager for development or the designee, which is me, has to make a determination as to the existence of a nonconformity. The applicant bears the burden of presenting evidence sufficient to allow making findings for that. And I was not presented any evidence or it even asked. So it never even came up.
Did you go back and take a look at the ordinance and see if you could follow the appellant's rationale on that?
I am looking at it right now, non-conforming uses of land.
I can tell you how I read it, which was that the ordinance allowed for a smaller lot in that zone if your house was built, if your house had access to water and sewer and was built before 1945. It didn't say anything about conversions, as I understood it.
Use of a non-conforming lot, lots of substandard size. When a non-conforming lot can be used in conformity with all applicable regulations except for minimum lot size, then the lot may be developed for permitted use. However, no use is permissible on a non-conforming lot where the lot size requirements for such use would necessitate a lot of a size greater than the established minimum lot area.
A lot of word salad in there, but
So the established lot area is, for a duplex, is 1.5 times, so.
as I read it, it would be 1.5 times the smaller amount, the amount that was allowed for lots that were in, that had water and sewer.
Correct.
And where was the mention of before 1945? That was also in that section, wasn't it?
28.5.3, maybe paragraph or sentence B.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at non-conforming, so let me go to 28.5.3.
It wasn't easy to figure out, but I
Certain large, older residential structures constructed prior to 1945, together with the original attached accessory, which isn't applicable, may be converted to include additional dwelling units subject to the following standards. We're not in a performance district. For conversion to 2 or 3 units, the building shall be located on a lot which meets the requirement for the minimum lot size for the district in which the lot is located, which it does. For 2 units. It doesn't say anything though about the 1.5. So I see, say again your rationale.
Okay, I'm not sure which case I'm arguing, the fact that we should get a variance, the fact that we don't need one, but.
well, right, because things are a little irregular here, I'd like to see if we can't resolve the issue tonight.
Okay, well, oh, sure.
So-
Well,
I would too. That
Yeah.
would be
So
great.
if there was something that was overlooked or just not clear, and the board does have the power to decide that the variance isn't necessary.
Okay,
So if the board so chooses.
I guess I'd focus on the argument that in light of 28.5.3, that waives the 1.5 factor that's applied to table 28.4.1, which is the 12,500 square foot lot size and the 100-foot frontage. So so in other words, what I'm saying is that that 1.5 factor does not apply in this case. So,
Yeah,
and it's just 28.4.1, that dimensional table is the only thing that's really considered in a house of this age.
And if you're correct, that only you still need a variance on the frontage,
On the
right?
frontage.
No, I think it's 100 feet for,
Oh,
so
the
so there's
same
an
rule would
RM
apply.
zoned with sewer is 100 feet. This lot has 120 feet.
Oh, so the same rule would apply as to frontage? It would be
Yeah,
you're saying
it's
it would be
the
100
same
instead of
thing.
150.
They applied a multiplying factor of 1.5 to table 2481, you know, for the conversions, but I don't believe that's applicable for houses that were built prior to 1945.
Now, it took me quite a while to trudge through this when I was trying to figure it out for myself, and I may not have gotten it right, but I thought the provision concerning the 1945 and so on made reference back to the minimum lot size and the table that also requires the 1.5 times,
Large older.
which would have meant to me that it would have been 1.5 times the lot size that was allowable for lots with water and sewer, in which case the number that is in the application is correct. So that, but I may have gotten that wrong. That's,
Seriously, yeah, there's some ambiguity there.
so I want to, and no one has ever accused me of having a
It's me.
sharp legal mind here, so.
I know I don't.
I think he can too. I don't think he needs a variance.
There are many people in this room who can confirm that.
Can I ask you a,
So-
go ahead.
Oh.
No, you go ahead.
I apologize. Quick clarifying question. The conversion is all internal
Yeah.
to the house?
Right.
And you're, what, adding a bathroom or, in other words, how are you making it 2 units?
It's basically, it's an all one big house, so it's already has a second kitchen, a second bathroom.
It's already a
It's-
duplex in a lot,
it's- yeah.
structurally,
Okay.
just not legally.
So legally, you just want to be able to use it legally as a duplex?
Yes.
Correct.
Mhm.
I'm inclined to agree.
It sits empty
I
right now.
think
so.
28-5-3 applies.
And supersedes
Yeah,
the other?
I do.
All right, well, do any of the board members have any reason to dispute that?
I think you came up with something that, something there. Because I feel like this is, probably applies to other cases
Okay.
that we haven't noticed.
Very good. Well, what we can do here, now, was there anything else remaining that would need to be dealt with, or would that retire the whole case?
That would retire the whole case.
All right.
Frontage?
That would go back
Frontage, okay.
to size.
All right. What I'd suggest to the board is that we continue with the hearing on the basis of this question, which is whether or not it's needed, and then handle it as we would an appeal of the ruling of the code enforcement officer. How's that sound to you?
We're not following you. I'm not following you.
In other words, ask them to step down, find out if there's anybody in favor or in opposition, if there's anything else from code enforcement, and so on. And then, if not, we would solicit a motion and a vote on whether or not a variance is required.
Okay.
That sound good?
Yes. To be safe, I suppose, if there's any objections, we might as well get it.
Yeah, I don't want to
Sure.
foreshorten things
Yeah.
just because I'd like to get out of here and go watch TV.
Does the code enforcement officer need that determination by us, or can she?
Well, we can retire the whole issue tonight by making that decision, because I believe we do have that authority. So then if people don't like what we did, they can come back and ask us about it, but that's
Sounds terrific.
okay. Did you have anything else on this particular part of the question that you'd like us to hear? In the event that we decide that a variance is required, we'll let you come back and start over, but not later tonight.
Okay,
Okay?
so we just need to have a seat then?
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
I have a feeling you're not going to be out there for long.
okay, thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? This is the question of whether or not a variance is required. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition? Any comments from code enforcement?
No.
Nope. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. And pursuant to the conversation we've already had, I'll solicit a motion concerning the question of whether or not a variance is actually required in this case.
Well, I would move to affirm Planning's, sorry, what's your official title again, sir?
City planner.
City planner, thank you. City planner's determination that a variance is not needed, and therefore, the remaining question is.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Can we add to that motion based on 28-5-3?
We certainly can.
Based on 28-5-3.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is not required. You're all set. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime you'd like to apply for my job, feel free. Okay.
Somebody approves.
Is that them?
Yeah, I was done.
Okay, now what have I done with my agenda? Yeah, thanks. I'll find it in a minute. Next case is 4.2. Ari Pollock with Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell on behalf of St. Paul School requests approvals for variances from Section 2872CB, Table of Off-Street Parking Requirements, to allow 96 parking spaces where 1,334 parking spaces are required. Section 2875, Requirements for Handicapped Accessible Parking Spaces, to allow 5 accessible parking spaces where 24 accessible parking spaces are required. And Section 2843C1, Wetland Buffers and Setbacks, certain uses prohibited in buffers to allow construction of a building or structure in 8,200 square feet of wetland buffer, where construction of a building in a wetland buffer is prohibited. All of this at tax map lot 724Z1 and tax map lot 811Z1, generally located at 87 Dunbarton Road in the institutional IS district in the open space residential district. ZBA 0230-2024, was that the old case number?
Yes.
Okay. I swear you well in. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but.
I do.
Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Yeah, let me, if I could, Mr. Chairman, introduce our team tonight for you. I finally figured out, by the way, what's different about this room. We're not using that screen anymore. You now have a ginormous television that I hope you're renting out for football parties.
We are.
Excellent, I'll get on the list.
Or we had to watch on our laptops. It was inconvenient.
I'm Ari Pollock. I'm with the law firm of Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell here in Concord. To my left is Bill Massey, a Senior Director of Facilities and Planning for the St. Paul School. To my immediate right is Zinat Yousefai. I've been practicing that. Was I close?
Very close.
Awesome.
Not quite.
Well, I did my best.
You did good. You did good.
Zinat is with the architectural firm of Kieran and Timberlake in Philadelphia. And to her right is Chris Danforth, a certified New Hampshire wetland scientist with Danforth Environmental Consulting. And back behind us is Morgan Dunson of the Nobis Group, the civil engineering firm for this project. The applicant owns and operates the St. Paul School, which, as you all know, is a private secondary education institution. It's a fixture in the west end of Concord, and it's been there since 1856, which I thought was astonishingly long time, and certainly long before we thought about things like parking of vehicles and even wetlands ordinances and even the Civil War. The applicant is proposing a redevelopment of its existing athletics field house and fitness center, all of which is located in the campus along Dunbarton Road. The redevelopment includes the addition of several new indoor squash courts and facilities ancillary to those courts, and locker rooms and team rooms and so forth, equipment storage. And on the screen there, you'll see a conceptual rendering of what is there today plus what is proposed. And if I dare try and do this from memory, the yellow area is the existing parking lot that serves the purple, white, and orange areas, which are the existing facility. The light blue box is the proposed area. Okay, I'm getting nods. I think I'm on it. We are here to request 3 variances that would allow us to proceed to planning for the light blue addition area. First is a variance from the table of off-street parking requirements to allow the existing 96 parking spaces to serve the existing and expanded athletic facility for what is, of course, an allowed educational and institutional use. The second is a variance from Article 28.7.5 relating to the requirements for accessible parking spaces. And again, we're asking that 5 spaces be allowed where the ordinance would require 24 such spaces. And then lastly, we're asking for a variance from 28.4.3C1, which is the wetland buffers and setbacks section or overlay, to allow occupation of 8,200 square feet of buffer impact. To allow,
That was me.
oh,
Sorry.
you're, no problem, I'm glad it wasn't me. To allow expansion of an existing building and structure into a wetland buffer. We're going to get into the details of each of these requests. As to the straight-up parking variance, a variance would require that the unique circumstance of a secondary education institution that has no day students. They are 100% boarding, and the students are not allowed to bring vehicles. Right there, you've done away with the vast majority of your parking demand, and in fact, they're not allowed to bring those vehicles. Additionally, faculty and staff presently utilize designated campus parking areas, and for all of us who have been there from time to time, we know that the campus is very walkable in many respects, and wherever you have parked, you can get around on foot. The existing athletic facility is served with a sufficient number of sufficient number of parking spaces, that 96 spaces I referred to in the yellow areas, and it more than accommodates daily visitors and vendors that do arrive by vehicle. On occasion, there are larger events that occur at the athletic facility, but St. Paul's is trained and used to managing overflow in various other places of its campus. 2 of those such places are indicated on the plan with arrows and text boxes. One is across the street, across Dunbarton Road, and the other is out and to the right along Dunbarton Road. Neither of those areas are, well, at least the one across the street is not counted in our variance application. It is purely overflow in the event a large tournament or some sort of a athletic event is occurring. The school also can and does use shuttle busing for events that fill even those proximate areas. So short answer is they know how to do this already and would do more when and if needed. In essence, it's the uniqueness of the applicant's population, the age of the buildings, the age of the campus, long before ordinance existed on these things, and the supplemental parking that's nearby that supports the request. We feel the use is quite reasonable because it would allow for expansion of an existing and allowed use, and again recognize the unique circumstance of the campus scenario without requiring unnecessary construction, maintenance, and impervious lot coverage associated with the type of parking that would be required. And I was remiss not to tell you that if you went by the strict ordinance and you used the square footage of the existing and proposed area, you would need a whopping 1,334 parking spaces, which is clearly out of whack with what's going on there today. Public interest supports the granting of the application, frankly because of the applicant's desire to reinvest and upgrade in facilities that offer quality education to its students. The applicant's upgrade is not intended to increase its capacity for new students or enrollment. The idea here is simply to offer the best facilities it can to its existing students and future students, keeping those enrollment numbers the same. We'll have more on this from Bill in a moment, but the request arises in a largely self-contained private campus environment where every applicant has where the applicant rather has every incentive to best management practice its safe and well-organized handling of parking. They don't want complications any more than this board or the city. The spirit and intent of the ordinance and substantial justice are served because it would be consistent with allowing the expansion of what is a permitted use in this institutional district, a district which clearly was created around an existing school and recognizes that it's there and there to stay. The surrounding property values, there's no evidence to suggest that the surrounding properties, many of which are at a significant distance, would have any impact from the school expanding the building or relying on its existing parking, and no one would be parking near those properties if there was an overflow event. There are other campus areas. The justifications for the request on accessible parking are very similar. I'll hit them quickly for your record. But essentially, it's again recognizing that this particular secondary education institution, again, has no day students, and boarding students are not allowed to bring their vehicles. Faculty and staff utilize other areas. In the event that larger or occasional events are held, the applicant currently does a great job managing parking load from the field house facility, and certainly would have the ability to designate additional accessible spaces and move other parking in relation to those events to a more satellite location. They can mix and match as needed to make sure everyone is safely accommodated. Again, a reasonable use variance would allow the expansion of what exists today without unnecessary additional construction or lot coverage. It's in the public interest to allow this type of upgrade so that the school can continue to offer the best facilities it can to its students, faculty, and staff. And again, the value of surrounding properties, there's nothing to suggest that granting this relief would have any negative impact on the value of the properties. That brings us to the last request, which is incursion into the wetlands buffer. I want to be clear here that this is not a request to impair the wetland itself, and we do not anticipate the need to file a wetland fill permit with the state DES. This is an incursion into the buffer that is created by the city's ordinance. The footprint of the building would be into a portion of the 50-foot buffer created by ordinance. We've done our best to avoid and minimize this impact. We've thought through the constraints that are presented by the existing conditions, and we have some slides that we'll present in a moment that show essentially how we've considered a few other placements, and that this relatively small area of encroachment is a fairly reasonable compromise when you consider some of the other factors that are at play here. I'd like to turn it over to Bill in a moment to explain the importance of expanding these facilities, frankly, the need for the project, the need for modernization, and how the school uses these things for recruitment and competition for qualified students and so forth. I'm then going to ask Zinat to show a few slides that have alternative footprints that we've considered and talk through the pros and cons of that. Should I get? And then lastly, as I mentioned, we have Chris Danforth, a wetland scientist, here with us tonight, and he's going to be able to explain the encroachments into the buffer and how they have a de minimis impact on the health and function of this wetland relating to an interim stream. I've talked enough. Let me ask Bill to take it for a few minutes.
Sure. So there are a couple factors driving the need for this facility. One is our current squash building was built in 1925. It has 10 courts in it, which is what we're replacing in our new facility. But it does not function well for a building of that vintage. The sport has evolved, the way the sport is coached has evolved, the way people spectate is different now than when the building was built. And there's a shortage of utilitarian spaces that we need in a building like this: locker rooms, changing rooms, restrooms, things like that that help support the functionality, which they exist, but they're small and undersized, so it makes it hard to manage that building for its current use. Interestingly enough, the first squash courts in this country were built in Concord, New Hampshire, on St. Paul's campus. That was in the late 1800s when a faculty member took a trip to Canada and became enamored with the sport and brought it back here. And then there was a small squash facility built on the campus, which was then in 1925 moved to its current location. So for all the reasons around functionality, it's a heritage sport for the campus. It means a lot, both for St. Paul's and its alumni, but also in terms of our ability to recruit students and stay competitive. So the new facility essentially replaces in kind the former facility. One other thing I'd point out is when you look at the map on the screen, the squash building today is off the top of that page, which means students, the AFC, which stands for the Athletic Fitness Center, I think that's what it stands for. I'm new to St. Paul, so I'm still learning. But the students come and change there in the locker rooms, and then it's a winter sport, so that they then leave that facility and walk over to the squash facility and then come back. So another driver was to co-locate the new facility so that the existing locker rooms and the sports spaces, like restrooms for spectators, were easily accessed, and just the way the whole program flows is much better. Zenette will talk in a minute about other options which we studied, but all of those options looked at connecting this building to the AFC so that we can take advantage of those other amenities. And I think one other thing I would mention is, not surprisingly, a school like St. Paul's, a program like squash does generate a lot of enthusiasm from our donors and our alumni. So we have identified this as a priority project for the school, and we are, getting a lot of interest from our alumni in terms of seeing this happen. So it's generating a lot of enthusiasm from multiple angles, but my main driver is the functionality and use of the facility and making it something where the kids can stay in warm spaces and go back and forth from the play spaces to the functional spaces, and save a little time and stay warm. So those are.
Quick question.
Yeah.
AFC, is that where the hockey arena is?
No, so that's, there were two priority projects that came out of a study we did. One was the new hockey center and one was a new squash center. The hockey center is located even further away. And so that's the one other main athletic facility that's not connected to this building, but the cost to relocate to ice sheets is enormous and outside of our budgetary range.
So what are you doing with are you gonna, if this plan goes through, what are you gonna do with the existing building, demolish it?
No, good question. So it will remain as a recreational squash center, at least for the time being, because the squash is such a popular sport on campus, and we want to generate excitement around the sport with especially younger kids. So it's going to become sort of a secondary facility, both for recreational purposes and also to run tournaments when we need to, when the case arises. But long term, we can see it being converted to a different use, but it's really up in the air. I don't think we are planning to demolish it. It has a heritage because it's an older building on campus. There's a lot of appeal from just some historical context.
a little bit about, get to the right place and turn the slides the right direction. Okay, so this is here on the screen, an aerial photograph of the existing AFC and adjacent buildings. And the new squash addition would be located on this side of it. As Bill mentioned, we were looking to find a location that was adjacent to the AFC and connected to the AFC to locate the addition so that we could take advantage of the existing spaces and facilities within that building, so as not to have to build more building than necessary. And where we landed was to attach it to the rear of the AFC. The main entrance to the AFC is right at this sort of crux right here. And when you come into the building, there's an atrium, a two-story sort of atrium space there, which is really the central hub of the building. And all of the space is more or less open onto that space. All the support spaces are easily accessed, so locker rooms, sports medicine rooms, bathrooms are all accessed from that central atrium space. So, excuse me. So the addition here would connect that lobby, which runs through here, to the new addition, and then the squash courts would be laid out along here, facing one another to allow for the coaching that Bill was just describing. It would be connected to the second floor of the existing athletic facility, so that it would be adjacent to other primary sports venues, so basketball courts, wrestling room, and so on. Some of the alternate locations we looked at were this location on the back of an existing indoor tennis court to the side of the AFC, and another location in front of the AFC here along Dunbarton Road. The downside to locating the addition here in A is that it would displace the 42 existing parking spaces that are there now, including 4 accessible spaces, and it still encroaches on the wetland buffer. It also just removes the program further away from the central lobby space and sort of removes that connectivity of people and students to those other athletic facilities within the building. Pulls them further away from the locker rooms, the bathrooms, and all the support spaces they need. It also requires building more building in order to make that connection. On the right side, we looked at an option to put the addition in the front of the building. That displaces 9 existing parking spaces there, including 1 accessible space, and it encroaches on the shoreline buffer to the Turkey River, which is just to the east there. Another downside of that is that it doesn't connect the space to that central lobby space, and it requires taking out existing space within the building to provide that connection to that new squash addition. So for those reasons, we've landed on this space here, this location here, which is in the application, as the best for the function of the program and also the least impact on the site.
So I guess that's me.
It's you, sir.
So my name's Chris Danforth. I'm a certified wetland scientist. Been at this for about 30 plus years. And I was asked to do a functional assessment because of the wetland located behind the proposed building. The wetland there's basically 3 parts to this wetland. To the southwest is a large forested swamp, and it discharges intermittently through this stream channel, which runs right behind the proposed building, and that is the buffer that we're concerned with. The stream discharges down to the northeast towards Turkey River, which is a large wetland complex, and the Turkey River is also a designated river subject to the Shoreline Protection Act is a state regulation. So basically, I prepared this functional assessment, which is based on the Army Corps of Engineers highway methodology. It's a qualitative assessment methodology that looks at 14 functions and values that wetlands potentially support. Basically, the more functions and values you have in a wetland, the more valuable it's considered. The wetland systems, you know, that we are looking at is this intermittent stream. And the functions and values that I was looking at, there's basically principal functions. You look at each function and determine if it's present in that wetland. For a stream channel, it's basically confined to the channel, and the buffer that we have, you know, is basically situated around this wetland. The primary functions that I determined were present for this stream are sediment shoreline stabilization, basically bank stabilization of that stream channel, and because of the proximity to the school and these quite a few different wetland types in the area associated with the Turkey River, educational value was considered a principal function as well.
Can you repeat the first function again?
Sediment and shoreline stabilization.
So making sure, can you like put that into like layperson language?
Sure. It's so basically the wetland in a wetland complex, say a marsh, you have open water, and then you have typically a scrub shrub or an emergent, you know, a vegetative buffer, and then you have a transition to maybe a scrub shrub, which is more of a woody plants, low-growing shrubs, and then transitions into possibly a forested area, forested wetland, or an upland. Wetlands like that have really high value in shoreline stabilization because the vegetation buffers any kind of wave impact and erosion. In this case, with this small stream, we have you know, pretty complex root systems, and it's a pretty narrow channel. It's very bouldery, so it's stable. It's basically it takes a lot of flow, and does the banks are not impacted. So
stable meaning that it minimal erosion.
Yeah, it
Okay.
withstands flood events, you know, any kind of high flow situation. So that was one of the considerations. It protects the downstream wetland from sedimentation. So I consider that was as one of the primary functions. Again, educational value, its proximity to the school. You know, if they're going to do an environmental studies class, it's available to many different types of wetlands in the vicinity. You've got the Turkey River. It's a floodplain riparian zone, which has a lot of different types of wetland classes. So basically, I found that those two principal functions for this wetland, and you know, my finding was that impacts based on this proposed project with, I think it's 8,200 square feet of incursion into the buffer. You know, first of all, we're not impacting the wetland itself. We're impacting the buffer, which consists of, you know, forest land, lawn area, driveways, pavement within that 50-foot buffer. With best management practices during construction and maintenance during the life of the building, we can control any kind of degradation or any impacts to that stream channel. Basically,
Can I ask another quick question then?
yeah, absolutely.
So I think I have some sense, but maybe just kind of dumb it down. Obviously, I understand what the purpose is of, you know, not being able to build on the wetlands themselves.
Right.
But then so what's if you're saying, well, it's just the buffer, what's the purpose of the rule against building in the buffer? Is it just that the wetlands can kind of change over time, so you just don't want to get too close? I mean, why do they have that rule?
The buffer?
Yeah.
Well, the state doesn't have a buffer, but the town,
Yeah.
the city obviously does.
Yeah.
basically, it all boils down to water quality protection. So you want to have a stabilized buffer, whether it's trees or grass or, there's a lot of, best management practices that are in play these days that can do the same thing. Stormwater management, taking runoff and running it through a treatment system and discharging it through controlled manner so it doesn't cause erosion or water quality impacts. So I think, my point is that with best management practices, we can avoid any kind of impacts, even if we're impacting the buffer.
The water body we're talking about, or water course we're talking about, is not the Turkey River. It's a stream that flows into it.
So,
correct?
yeah, so this wetland above the stream is basically what I call a headwater wetland. It's isolated wetland, it's forested, and say in the springtime, when you have spring runoff, it probably discharges through that stream. But, during the summertime, there's no flow. When I was out there was no flow through the stream. It's basically dry. It's an intermittent, ephemeral stream. So it's just subject to seasonal flow. It's not a constant, surface water. And like I said, it's almost a boulder field. If you look in the report I submitted, it's quite rocky and subject to a lot of erosion.
I did see the photographs.
They're in the report, if you want to circle down to them, there you go.
Other questions from the board?
So is it, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Your conclusions, recommendations outline some mitigation proposals?
No, I didn't recommend mitigation, but mitigating the impacts by using best management practices. So preventing any kind of impact.
Says a proper drainage and water quality treatment system will mitigate any potential loss of wetland function or value. So what are is there an existing drainage and water quality treatment system, or are you proposing something be added?
I guess that would be a good question for the engineer.
Yeah, so it's actually one I can help with. This application would, of course, go through planning, and one of the items that planning would look at is stormwater management. And because of the proximity to the buffer and to the wetland, we would certainly be required to collect, treat, and infiltrate whatever we could before it reaches the wetland area from the buffer. What's unique about this wetland area is that it's more of a channel between wetland areas than it is an actual recharge or marsh of its own, and that's why it's intermittent but yet defined, because when it carries water, it's carrying it from A to B, and it's not sitting there in some sort of a pond. What we're doing here is addressing the items that call out from the Army Corps' test for wetland characterization. There are actually 14 of them, and what Chris commented on in his work was 2 of them. Really the only 2 that are relevant. One of them actually is just the educational appeal of having a wetland area near a campus. The other one is stabilization, and as he was commenting, the boulders that, well, if you go up a couple of pictures, right, that, I think we might have passed it already, but yeah, so if you go down a couple more photos, you can really start to see, one more maybe? No, I missed it, but there you go. You can really start to see how the boulders shape this into a channel, and you're not talking about a free-flowing area where it's going to flood or spill into the buffer area, and you're worrying about pollutants or discharges from the developed area reaching the wetland. In this case, the buffer could be smaller and still accomplish its purpose because the channel is so defined.
So you're kind of saying the unique element of this wetland is that it's the nature of the wetland itself is, I don't want to say it's a lesser wetland, but it's kind of my kind of non-scientific way of saying it. So therefore, it doesn't need as extensive of a buffer, or any incursion is much more easily mitigated.
Exactly. It doesn't need more than what you would typically find in a stormwater management plan. And in particular, in this case, where you have these 14, assessment criteria, what you're able to conclude is that this particular wetland has a low function and value, and therefore does not need the full protective measure of a full buffer. And as Chris mentioned, the state doesn't even have buffers. That's a creation of the Concord City ordinance. It's not unusual that an ordinance have a buffer, but the state does not consider that to be a jurisdictional area. They worry only about the wetland itself.
So the application to the planning board will include a stormwater management plan?
Absolutely.
Which is what's referred to in the discussion section here concerning avoiding discharge into the remaining buffer area.
Correct.
And so there's several other items you mentioned, but. Okay. Other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know, Mr. Pollack?
I'd quickly hit on the variance criteria relative to the buffer request. I'd done the same for the parking. It's the unique circumstance of trying to exist and expand existing facilities that have been there long time. And even though the field house is a newer piece of construction, it's the physical proximity that we're trying to add on to that gets us near this buffer in the first place. The applicant, as we mentioned, has gone through an alternatives and minimization analysis, trying to weigh the impacts of buffer versus being in the shoreland versus eliminating parking versus trying to connect with the corridor and umbilical area of the existing structure, all of which weighs in favor of the proposed area. The use is reasonable because not only does it exist and we're expanding what exists, and it's a permitted use in an institutional zone, but as Chris's research indicates, the impact on the buffer would be negligible and able to be handled and managed with effective BMPs. The public interest is served, of course, by protecting the wetland, but in this case we can be confident that we won't have a deleterious effect on the wetland because of the channel nature of its construction. And the spirit and intent, I think the ordinance would support expansion where it won't have a negative impact, and the same, I think, would go with surrounding property values, which, as we mentioned in the parking scenario, are a long distance away. The campus is expansive, the open space percentages are expansive. We're not up against any of those factors when we move to our planning exercise. Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions?
I had a math question. I didn't bring my calculator tonight, but is the handicap ratio that you're proposing, the 5 to 97, is that the same as if the ratios for what would have been 1,300 to? It's about 5%. Is 5% on if we?
It might be close, actually, now that you mention it. I didn't do that math. I believe we would be required to have 24 accessible spaces if we went strictly by the ordinance, and we would need 1,334 spaces if we went for standard parking. So it's actually
Percentage is higher than you're offering more handicapped accessible parking than as a percentage.
I will take your word for it, but it looks close is my answer.
Engineers are all nodding their heads. So
Yeah, it
scientists,
looks close. I agree.
All right.
There was an engineer in the audience who made a positive gesture.
I saw that.
I would trust her more than my math.
Won't comment on that. Anything else you'd like us to know, or are we all good?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thanks very much. If you would retire for a moment, we'll see if there's anybody who'd like to step up. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
No.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, and I'll invite discussion by the members of the board. I'm going to start this one with Mr. Wallner. How do you see these, Nick?
Well, in terms of the parking, obviously the increased use of squash courts, I don't think is going to really add much increased demand in parking. They've already addressed the issue of how to deal with overflow parking. They've got the infrastructure to deal with that. So I'm confident that this won't impact on us considering reducing the parking requirement.
Mr. Monahan?
Yeah, we should probably take these up separately when we act on them, but I think the
Yeah, we will.
the parking proposal is completely reasonable given that there's not a lot of vehicles on that property that would be using it.
Mr. Winters?
I agree 100% about the parking. I noticed nobody ventured into the wetlands.
I thought
We're
we-
going to have to
I
get
know.
there sooner or later.
I agree 100% about the parking.
Agreed.
I concur.
Okay. Do we need to go around again on the subject of wetlands, or there were two, well, there's three issues, are there not? Number of handicap parking spaces, parking in general, and the wetland buffers and setbacks.
So, do you want to move on to
The wetlands?
Yeah.
Yes, sure.
I was glad I got the answer I did on the mitigation question, it'll have a home, but, I'll ask my other, I'm struggling, I didn't hear a lot about hardships.
On the question of the wetland,
Yeah, other than we don't get to build the building.
right. Mr. Wallner, do you have any thoughts on that one? Wetlands?
Well, I think we're offered alternate plans for other locations, and I think that would impact on the parking at that point, so perhaps that's partially addressing the hardship issue for me.
Mr. Winters?
That, and they obviously could build it near where it currently is, but that defeats the purpose of attaching it to the current gym so that the students can kind of be in one space instead of having to change and then walk over. I'm struggling a little because they didn't say this exactly, but I kind of got the impression the real argument is, well, the buffer can be mitigated. We'll mitigate it, in which case that could be true in any buffer case. Now they did, then Ari did come back and say, well, this stream is intermittent and I don't think I'm using the exact right language, but it's a minimal wetland, so to speak. And therefore the buffer doesn't need to be as extensive as in a typical case, which could be persuasive, but then I wonder, well, shouldn't the city address that? Because I imagine that's true of any wetlands. There must be a degree of it.
Can you say that one more time?
Maybe if that's true, then why wouldn't the city have addressed that in the code and said, well, for an extensive wetland, we need this much of a buffer, but, for wetlands that aren't as extensive, maybe we need a lesser. So anyway, that's my thought.
Mr. Dave?
I know we're only discussing what's in front of us, which is the center, the rear of the building, but I guess the other two they proposed also sit on a buffer of some kind. So, but I kind of agree. I'm kind of stuck on the hardship.
Okay.
So in the hardship, Andrew,
Yeah.
state another way, you're saying part of the hardship is that there would be children crossing Dunbarton Road because it's a winter sport at times, that it could be a safety issue?
Oh,
Am I saying that?
I didn't realize that was, I didn't realize that was an actual road.
It's a city road, right?
No, it's private.
Oh, but
It-
it's-
I haven't really
There
been
are
in there.
cars
Does
on.
it get some traffic?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's the loop
That's
around.
how you get to the other end of the campus.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't realize that they would be crossing a road, so that adds to what I was thinking.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we denied the wetland variance tonight and they came back with one of the other two alternatives, would they have to do also a new variance for those parking impacts?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
This would be a new case.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
if the parking design changed.
Yeah. As I see it, first of all, I think there's an overall hardship issue here because the St. Paul's campus is unique. And the zoning ordinance was, I think, originally conceived of to act as a preserver of the master plan, but also a referee between property owners who are close to each other and whose activities and uses of their land have influence on each other. In this case, what St. Paul's wants to do, which is true of almost everything they want to do, only influences them, with the possible exception of the wetlands. So I see for pretty much any request they want to make, they do have a unique piece of property, whether or not you consider the request reasonable. In the case of the parking, I think the request is eminently reasonable. I think they've made it pretty clear that they don't need all that parking. It's not in anyone's interest to build parking that's not needed. It's just pavement that's not doing anything. So I would have no problem supporting the request for relief from the parking and the handicap spaces. The handicap spaces will be in proportion to the parking use on the property. It's also true here, as we've observed with certain other situations, that any problem that their parking creates only a problem for them, because it's going to be completely contained within their property, and we heard testimony that they have long experience managing flow of cars through there and the parking through there. On the subject of the wetlands, I think not being able to build because of the wetlands could be construed as a hardship, partly because of the presentation they made on the subject of all the other places where they might be able to put this building, none of which was as good, even from the point of view of violations of the zoning ordinance. Second, because the city set this up as a zoning provision as opposed to an environmental regulation, they made it possible to appeal for variance, which means that implied to me in that is that if you can satisfy all the protection of all of the reasons why such a buffer would be there, you can make a reasonable case for variance. It's a little bit circuitous way around that question of hardship, but to my mind, the engineer was quite detailed and clear that the effect on the buffer would be effectively nil in terms of its doing any damage to the natural environment in that case, which makes a strong case given all the other reasons why it's reasonable to put an addition there to grant a variance. So that's how I look at it. I realize that the hardship question doesn't fall neatly into the category the way it often does in cases, but I can make a case in my mind for it. So why don't we take the parking and the wetlands question separately. So would anyone care to make a motion on the variance for parking, number of parking spaces, and also there was a variance for the handicapped accessible parking spaces?
I'll make a motion.
And what is your motion?
A motion to grant the variances.
Based on?
It just left my brain. That they have sufficient contingency plan for whatever events they host on the campus.
That there's a hardship inherent in their property.
The students don't.
Then the
have
students
cars,
don't.
And they live there.
Yeah. So there's not an added capacity there. No impact on neighborhood character or property values. Spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Spirit intent of the ordinance is still met.
Okay. Is there a second?
Could you perhaps include and the applicant's presented findings?
And which part?
The 5 items that the applicant included for,
That you were accepting as,
that you're accepting
as found fact.
as found fact, the applicant's findings.
This is new language for us.
I know. And it's the request of the city attorney, so.
We're slow learners, but we're so diligent.
And you don't have to read them all, you can just say.
Yeah, I like that part.
Yeah.
It's a purse into which you can toss everything.
Where'd that go?
Essentially, you can just cite, it's the application.
Yeah.
Just say we accept the findings of the applicant.
The
Accept the
applicant's,
findings of the application.
exactly.
Great.
or their findings, their
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, I wasn't sure how deep it. Okay, all right.
That's all, that's sufficient. That's perfect. Thank you.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it, and also add the fact that it won't decrease property values, which is one of the 5 criteria.
Very good.
Oh.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote, then we go to, the vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. That moves us to the question of the wetlands buffer impingement and whether or not a variance is appropriate there. Would anyone care to make a motion on that?
I'll make the motion on that.
To,
And I found the cheat sheet, Mark. I make the motion to grant the variance because of the criteria under RSA 674:33 has been met based upon the record before us, and I'll also add that the motion to adopt the applicant's proposed finding as the board's findings of fact. I'd add to that the issues of hardship are satisfied given the uniqueness of the St. Paul's campus and this corner of the property. There are de minimis impacts on the buffer, and that we recognize there are some public safety issues associated with children needing to cross the street to use locker room and other facilities, which would be offset by the construction of this facility.
one of the perks of being chair is you don't have to know all that stuff because you never make a motion. Would anyone care to make a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm convinced, I think, not that anyone wants to come in here and minimize the beauty of their own wetlands, but it seems like this particular stream is not as extensive a wetland as perhaps the code is envisioning with the 50-foot buffer. It's a fairly unique wetland in terms of its modesty, so.
Not all that wet.
It's only wet half the year, so
Right.
it gets half the.
It's more like a vernal dribble.
There you go.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. I believe that is all the business for St. Paul's tonight. You're welcome. That brings us to case 4.3. Ryan M. Dyer and Sarah Dyer request approvals for a special exception for a child daycare facility per section 2824JB, table of principal uses, educational and institutional, and a variance from section 2872EB, table of off-street parking requirements, to allow 9 off-street parking spaces where 15, 9 for the child daycare facility and 6 for the existing apartments, are required at 7678 South State Street in the urban transitional UT district. Would you like to come forward, please?
Wait a minute.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but it. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify, please?
Okay, I'm Ryan Dyer, co-owner of South State Street.
And I am Sarah Dyer, also co-owner of South State Street. So yes, we do own a building on 78 South State Street that is currently a multi-use building. On the second and third floor, there are residential apartments, and on the first floor, there is a office space that is currently in use, and we are asking for a special exception to switch over from an office space into a child care facility. And the second request that we have is for the parking to make sure that we have enough for the apartments as well as what we're proposing to ask to use for the bottom of the office space.
Can you speak to the criteria for a variance, please? Well, actually, no, let's go with a special exception first, which I think was had to do with the use.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Could you speak to the criteria for the special exception? You did cover it in your written application, but it's helpful to hear it in the hearing.
Right. So the criteria that we have is, oh geez, I should probably pull this up so I
have it on the screen too.
Oh, okay. Read it. Oh, yes. So like reiterate basically why it is that we're looking to,
No, how you meet the criteria.
oh, how we meet the criteria.
Yes.
Yes, so currently we have multiple offices within that space there that we would feel would benefit our community greatly to switch it over into a childcare facility. Being parents ourselves, we know how difficult it is for parents to try to find sufficient daycare for their children, and whereas we have we feel like a decent spot there, that we would like to be able to utilize that as best that we can, so that we can serve our community and, you know, give back to what we feel we can give.
As to the question, obviously it's specifically authorized in the ordinance, or you wouldn't be here. The use will not create undue traffic?
No, as of right now, we have we have a business that's in there currently, and where the childcare would be more of like a drop-off kind of pickup situation. It wouldn't be an overuse of people parking there constantly, and there is a fence that partially goes around the property so that the surrounding neighbors would not be constantly seeing a whole parking lot full of cars constantly.
Do you expect any additional storm runoff or any particular taxing of the utilities?
No, we do not foresee any of that, as well as we don't foresee having to add any more like restrooms or the water and sewer that we are currently on town water. We don't see that adding any more usage to what is already currently in there, like as of right now.
You expect to have the police and fire department around there regularly?
No, I'm really hoping not.
How many questions? Go ahead, Nick. No.
Three-part question. How many kids, age of the kids, and how many staff members?
So when I was chatting with the licensing coordinator, we had to go through this process first to see, based off of our square footage and things like that, how many we were able to have. So I think if we move forward, we can get a better idea, talking with the licensing unit, of what we are able to have inside of this facility here.
And what's
How
that
many
number?
square feet?
We have
Square feet of the current office
Yeah,
space?
the space that's gonna be the
About
daycare.
2,100?
2158, is that what I see?
And it's 40 per child, is that what the?
I think she was saying 30, around 30, 40.
So how many kids are you shooting for?
It's kind of, I think it's going to kind of depend on what we're able to have. I think I'm just going to kind of start out with myself currently, just to kind of see what the interest is, especially around the area. So maybe one or two, myself being one of the staff, and another, just to kind of see again where the.
What's the maximum number of kids you think you could have on that premise?
I think it's depending on, I think if we have, like myself, I think I can have 6 under, but if you add another support staff, I believe you can double that, depending on the age range of the children as well.
So I think we're asking because we're trying to get a sense of whether or not there's enough parking for the potential staff.
Oh, understandable, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so it would honestly be maybe 2 or 3 spots for staff total.
So you're gonna start off kind of small and handle it yourself, maybe one person,
Yes.
but then obviously, if it goes well, you might grow. I mean, just putting the exact rules aside in your own mind, like how many kids do you think you could fit in this space if you were like gonna maximize your total ability there?
Thinking about it, I think maybe between like 20, 25 total with the size that we are
Could be
given.
like 4 or 5
Maybe about
staff.
4 or 5 staff max, yeah.
Yeah, there's 4 or 5. If we keep the current layout, there's about 4 or 5 rooms. So you could have 1 staff per room, so that'd be 5, maximum 5 staff members, I would say.
Depends on the age of the kids, so if you have infants, you're gonna need additional staff for that.
And pick up and drop off, will they use the parking facilities or will it be on the street?
Yeah, currently, there's one way in, but that's also, you can turn around and leave. So there's room in the parking lot to drop off the street.
I wouldn't cause any congestion outside the street, just because we do have that little like parking lot attached to them.
I could be wrong, but I feel like it's a little unusual that you would have a daycare in the same building as apartment rentals. Do you have any concern about the safety of the kids with residents living there?
When thinking about it, there's no access for any of the current people that are living there to access that building, like access to the office space itself. Doors are locked and windows, we have all of kind of like the safety precautions around that, so there wouldn't be any interaction between them.
So there's no shared space, like the residents have completely separate entrances?
Entrance, yeah.
What about the parking? Would that be separate for the daycare and the residents?
As of right now, no, it is all kind of one. But
It's
yeah,
the
there
same
really-
lot,
it's-
but they
yeah.
would be designated a certain portion of the lot.
What about
Back
playground?
6 spaces.
What about playground?
So there is an opportunity for the back half of the lot to have a small outdoor area for the kids to play. Yeah.
And we'd like to add a
yeah.
fenced-in area back there.
Oh, yeah,
For a designated playground.
You don't have
area.
it now, but you might design it later.
Yeah,
Yes.
right now it's just all parking lot, but we'd like to take a portion of the parking lot. So there's, I think, 12 or 13 spots currently. We're taking that into account, that's why we only have 9 on there for the variance.
How many, you said 2 units, how many bedrooms are they? The residents?
2 one-bedrooms and 1 two-bedroom.
3 units, okay.
3 units, yeah.
So they each, there's 4 spots for the residents, basically.
We were thinking 6, but
If two
at least
bedrooms.
6, okay.
Yeah.
But your
2 for
intention
each.
is for this to be a licensed daycare facility, so a lot of these issues would be subject to the state licensure?
Yes.
So looking at the Google Maps satellite, it's not going to be a U shape anymore because you're closing off the back half to be the playground space or whatever.
Yeah, so that on the left-hand side of the building, that is owned by the lady that lives next to us. So
Yeah, we don't have a
actually
U.
own
Oh,
so that's
that,
just-
no.
oh, okay.
No.
Do you have access to the GIS?
I am working on that. 79, 76. Oops.
One above it. Right in there.
This one right there.
So it would, the possible playground would just be like that square area, or would it be like a
Those-
whole rectangle?
Where those 2 white cars are?
That
Would be
area.
That whole, we were thinking of fencing that whole area.
So like a square shape roughly?
Yes,
So your variance acknowledges that.
yes.
Wait, can you show where do the residents go in? Do they come in through the back, like?
So there's one egress from there is, through here, there's a entrance, so they would come in and they'd take a left into the apartments. The office space, you come in and take a right into the office. So there's an open exterior entranceway that's shared, I guess you could say, but it's only to get into the separate doors. There's another entrance, second egress from the front, and then back here, there is a private entrance to the 3rd floor apartment. Over here. So to access the daycare, it's either from the street or from the lot here. So this would be the drop-off area. They'd come in, drop their kids off, and they'd walk right in this door here.
Okay, so there is, briefly, some of the residents would come in and then they would come in the same door, but then they would go one way.
The 2 one-bedroom units would be regular access through here as well. And the 2-bedroom is back here. That's their main entrance. The front is rarely used. It's on the street. That's the second egress to all the apartments. It's never really used, but it's there.
I'm not gonna get too hung up on it, because I like what you guys are trying to do, but I personally would think if this is gonna be a long-term thing, if I was a resident, it might be a little awkward having, kids, like when you're bringing in your groceries or, stuff like that, I might have like totally separate entranceways. Maybe not.
We could look into,
Even with kids leaving too, the playground, the proposed playground would be in the back. That there's a ramp that's kind of
there's a
right over
handicap,
there. Yep.
ADA accessible ramp right here. That would be the entrance to the playground, so that would be completely private.
Yeah, so there wouldn't be kids walking out that front door at all. Like it would just be inside the facility as well as just in the back.
It would only be when they're getting dropped off.
Fair enough, yes.
Could you speak to the question of hardship with regard to the parking?
Yes, so I guess like you can say the hardship on, if you're talking about for the surrounding.
Well, yeah, the question has to do with the characteristics of the property and your building on it and how the literal enforcement of the ordinance creates a hardship for you.
Yeah, so if we weren't able to have that like many spots like granted to us, I feel like we wouldn't be able to grow maybe as big as we would like. So we feel that by asking for those spots, I think we could grow a business that again I think would probably do pretty well.
We wouldn't be able to have a daycare there, I don't believe, right? The rule.
Yeah, that you need the 15 spots.
No, you
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Well, you could have it, you just then you couldn't have the playground.
Well, even with the playground, that's 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 maximum. So we're getting rid of two of the
I see.
2 or 3 of the spots. So the white cars, the 2 white cars would go away, but that only leaves us 9, max 10 spots on that side. Pointing.
One thing you might
This
point
side here.
If I'm not mistaken, that section of State Street, parking on the street usually isn't much of a problem, is it?
No,
Is
this
this
usually,
a problem you're asking?
Yeah, people can usually park on the
There's
street.
plenty of
if they
options
need
for
to.
yeah.
parking.
It's not like, unless there's a big event or something, there's rarely would that all be taken up, right?
No, yeah,
That's right.
it's available parking, but there's rarely cars.
yeah,
there.
there's
Any other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
I think that's it.
Thank you. With that, the record will show that there was no one present to be heard for or against the appeal. Any comments from code enforcement? No comments from code enforcement. We'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing, and I'll invite the board to discuss the case. Starting with you, Mark. Wake up.
I am struggling with the hardship a little bit, but on the whole, I don't really have a problem with it. There is definitely a childcare crisis going on. The substitution of we just talked about the availability of parking on State Street isn't really an issue, and I would hope that being right in the center of downtown, the families that end up enrolling their kids here and some of the employees could maybe be walking distance to the business. So on the whole, I support it. I am struggling with hardship just a little bit, though.
Mr. Winters.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the employees end up living up there.
Yeah.
I do wonder a little how all this is gonna work. I mean, I like the ambition. I hope it works well, but I think it's a great use of the space. I mean, office space is gonna be pretty tough to get. You could get people, but I don't think there's gonna be a huge demand for office space right there. So I think it's a creative use of the space. So I hope it works. I think the parking is, because there's ample parking on State Street if needed, and also they've got 3 units, but I think they said 2 of them are 1 bedroom. So unlikely all the tenants are gonna have 2 cars all the time. So I think it'll work.
Mr. Davey, or no, you're Mr. Davey. Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, I'm inclined to support. I think many of the particular issues you talked about would be addressed by the state licensing issues. I think what's before us is 2 separate issues. One is the use variance for childcare facility, and my colleagues have addressed the need for that, and I think they've created enough explanation with regard to the parking.
I think it's actually a special exception.
Special exception, it's not used, right, special exception to use it as a daycare facility.
Right. Yeah. Mr. Wallner.
I'm generally in favor of any daycare request. The issues that I have, I think, will be addressed by the state licensing. I'm concerned a little bit about shared entrance with tenants and kids. I'm also a little concerned about a parking lot that requires turning around within the parking lot. Generally speaking, daycares most folks will drop their kids off at about the same time they're on their way to work, so you could have a multitude of cars arriving at the same time. But I don't think that's our issue. It could be our issue under the special exception criteria, but I think state licensing would also look at that.
I agree with my colleagues. I think the criteria for a special exception are easily met in this case, and don't really require much more discussion. I think we can, the applicant's written application, I would accept those findings of fact. Anyone making a motion would have their own say on it. And on the subject of parking, it's a little bit trickier. The ordinance has never been a good fit to this part of town in terms of parking and the sizes of things and the sizes of lots they're on and so forth. And just being there creates a hardship for a lot of people in a lot of cases. And I'm not unmindful of the fact that this is an extremely important service that they want to provide, and that there are many ways in which the issues of safety and appropriateness are dealt with outside of the issue of zoning. So I'm willing to consider that the configuration of the lot and the building in that neighborhood does create a hardship. Would anyone care to make a motion on the subject of the special exception?
Can I ask one more question?
You bet. Sure.
So it's 15 required, and in the memo it's 6 plus 9. Are we specifying that it's now 6 plus 3, or is it 3 for the 3 units plus? We don't have to get into that.
No, you don't have to specify that. That was just for your information.
Right, that's just how they get the calculation, but once they calculate it, we just rule on whether they get the exception or not.
Or we could send somebody from the city over there every day to make sure that the wrong person's not parking in the wrong place.
Right. Is that the director of planning that does that?
Yeah, director of planning probably would ask her to go over to city planner. You don't want lower level staffer over there doing something like that. Did anyone start to make a motion, or am I wandering around here by myself?
No, I think the question.
Okay. Would anyone care to make a motion on the special exception for the daycare use?
I'd move to approve it. I mean, there's minimal risk of additional burden on the services, but I think that's really outweighed by the benefit of what they're trying to do.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Can you include to adopt the applicant's proposed findings as the board's findings?
I move to adopt the applicant's proposed findings. And I want them to be the board's findings.
Would anyone care?
I don't want to say it exactly like she said it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Would anyone care to second the motion? Did somebody second it? Oh, it's seconded, and you're content with the modification of the motion?
Yes, and the adoption of 5 criteria by Mr. Winters.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? And now the question of the variance for the parking. Does anyone care to make a motion?
I'm a little scared.
I'll make a motion to approve based upon the required criteria, and adopt the findings of fact, but make note of the discussion around being mindful of the state licensing requirements revolving drop off and parking lot planning.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. That takes care of the regular case agenda tonight. We also have before us approval of last month's minutes. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'm not voting, I wasn't present.
Very good.
Hold on just 1 second. Sorry, are we doing minutes or findings of fact?
Minutes.
Minutes first.
And Mr. Monahan?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Winters? Who did the second?
I did.
Yeah, okay.
And now the findings of fact from last month, which were submitted to us in writing. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the findings of fact from last month.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous.
And not voting since I wasn't here.
Very good. And now I guess the question of the calendar is raised, including the 4th of July.
Oh, I missed that.
It's in the agenda toward the end there.
She has it on the board, so.
Okay. I mean, the calendar is what it always is, first Wednesday of the month. Sometimes we adjust it because of a holiday. So the question is, are people going to be around? It would be on July the what, 7th? If it's the first Wednesday?
Is that federal holiday?
Oh, no, wait a minute, that's not right.
It would
July
be-
the,
It would be
July
July
9th.
2nd if it was the first.
okay.
Okay, I'm
And you've got it in for July
We
9th
have
at
it listed
this
as
point.
July 9th. but
Right.
We can make it July 2nd.
From my point of view, it makes no difference. I can be here either day. I'm not going to be away then.
We haven't scheduled it, we may be traveling, but if we were, it'd probably be the second. But
You'd be away the second.
I may be away in the second, but I don't.
Was everybody comfortable with the 9th?
Yes.
I'm good. You good?
It'll be alternate night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yes, I'm
Okay.
I'm from.
I have no idea.
I
I
don't
don't know where I'm gonna be tomorrow.
I will build.
All right.
I will build my year around being there.
Then there's absolutely no reason to change the calendar on your account.
And I will point out that also likewise, January, the first Wednesday in 2025 is January 1st. which
Oh, we'll be
is a
here.
holiday, so. So the hearing date for January is January 8th. Just wanted to. bring
Sounds
that
like a
to-
plan.
All right.
On
Is
the
it-
application deadlines is Monday, July 7th, a federal holiday.
Is July 7th a federal holiday?
Well, they usually do a Monday holiday around the, I don't.
No, the 4th is a Friday.
Yeah, the 4th is
4th is-
Friday.
Oh, so that's the federal holiday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 4th is always the 4th, no matter when it is.
Okay.
I mean, it's the 4th.
Yeah, but he's right, that if the 4th was on a Sunday, it would be Monday.
It would
Yeah.
be
If the
Monday.
4th
Yes.
was a Saturday, it would be Friday.
Next year, it'll be on Monday.
I'm almost
Or will it be Friday?
Right.
Well, we'll worry about that next year, or 2 years from now. Any other business to come before us? Anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Oh, I'll do that.
Oh, all right. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? The meeting is adjourned.
Some informal questions.